These as well.
To address three key areas that we think shape this election from an economic point of view. One is our economic future that includes Donald Trump's tariffs, our ability to cope with an economic downturn. Then there's the cost of living, so energy, jobs, fuel, groceries, all those things that people really feel very much at home now. Then to Australia's competitiveness, record numbers of small businesses are collapsing right now. What has to change to make Australia a great place to do business in and to make money as well? We'll also, just interestingly, do this tonight. We're going to ask each of you to ask the other one a question. Got the question ready? That'll be good. Tell you what, we'll see how that goes. And if that doesn't start the sparks flying, we're going to bring in Sky News political editor Andrew Clennell, who is sure to ruffle some feathers. So they're the rules. Jim Chalmers, you get the first word. You've got a minute or so to sell us on your vision for Australia and why, under a government that you're a senior leader of, why it will always be the greatest place on earth.
Thanks very much, Ross, for the opportunity tonight, and thanks, Angus, for the chance to speak to everyone at home about the choices that are central to this election. These are uncertain times in the world, but Australia is well placed and well prepared because of our economic plan, but also because of the progress that we have made together as Australians. Now, when this government came to office, inflation was much higher and rising. Real wages and living standards were falling sharply, and we were already on track for more than $1 trillion of debt. And since then, inflation has come down considerably. Real wages and incomes and living standards are starting to grow again. Unemployment is low. We've created 1 million jobs. Interest rates have started to come down. We've got the debt down, and growth is rebounding solidly in our economy as well. So all of this puts us in good stead in uncertain times, but we know that there's much more work to do because we do understand that people are still under pressure, and we know that the global environment is so uncertain. And that's why our economic plan is so important, and it's why we seek a second term to do justice to the progress that Australians have made together in our first. Our economic plan is about helping with the cost of living, cutting taxes and making the Australian economy more resilient in uncertain times.
All right, Jim Chalmers, you've got a few extra seconds there. I'll probably give that to Angus Taylor as well. Angus, I want your pitch as to why the coalition should be the government after this election.
Well, thanks, Ross. Thanks, Jim. It's great to be here. And we are living in uncertain and tumultuous times. And the choice at this election is, who do you trust to manage the economy? The context for it is that Australians are worse off than they were just 3 years ago, as they dig deep into their savings, as they work harder for less, and as they cut back on essential spending. Now, Labor promised the world. They promised lower electricity prices. They promised lower mortgage costs. They promised a lower cost of living and easier lives. The reality has been different. Prices are up, debt is up, deficits are up, spending is up, taxes are up. But the one thing that is down and it's collapsed is Australian standard of living that's fallen more than ever before in our history, more than any of our peer countries around the world. Now, there is an alternative, a better plan to get this country back on track, to beat inflation, to boost growth, to back small business, to fix our housing and energy markets, and to provide immediate relief at the bowser as we fix our budget to ensure that we protect our nation for the future. I'm really looking forward to talking more about our plan tonight.
All right, then, to both of you, thank you very much. You don't want to pick each other apart at this stage? Anything you want to have a go at each other about?
I think we can agree tonight, Angus, that we'll be respectful about this exchange, and I think it's a good opportunity.
Not if I had my choice, you know. Anyway, we'll wait and see. Anyway, let's go to our first segment, and that is about Australia's future. Jim Chalmers, I want to start with you here. This debate is just hours after Donald Trump's tariffs have hit the world, right? Now, just to show you that these tariffs, even on Australia, are being taken seriously in Washington right now, I want you to listen to this heated debate in the US Senate today between the Democrat Mark Warner and the US Trade Rep Jamison Greer talking about Australia. Have a listen.
Australia got hit with a 10% tariff as well.
Senator, Australia has the lowest rate available under the new program. They ban imports of American beef and pork.
Ambassador, excuse me. We already have a free trade agreement. We have a trade surplus. So getting the least bad, why did they get whacked in the first place?
They ban our beef. They ban our pork. They're getting ready to impose measures on our digital companies.
Australia basically denies access to its huge market, but not as a result of tariffs so much as non-tariff barriers to trade.
Australia also blocks on specious, fake science grounds, the export of fresh and frozen U.S. pork.
So, Jim, to you, the Prime Minister can't even get a call at the moment with the President of the United States about this. The fact of the matter is Australia, like the rest of the world, has been whacked. And as you were hearing there, even senators in the US are saying, why Australia?
I've met Senator Mark Warner. He's a good person and he's a good friend of Australia, and we appreciate his support. And a lot of the sentiments that he expressed in that clip points that the Prime Minister has made himself when the Prime Minister responded to these needless and self-defeating tariffs.
But they're only 10% for Australia. The rest of the world got much more in many cases. Didn't we escape lightly? Don't we just keep quiet and say not too much about this, get on, because the US is still going to take our beef?
We have a Prime Minister who is speaking up for Australians and standing up for Australia and for our national economic interest. And that's what the Prime Minister has been doing. And our response is all about making our economy more resilient, our markets more diverse, and engaging with the world, including engaging with the Americans. And here I think we've got the first contrast of the debate tonight, the first choice, because we've got a Prime Minister standing up for and speaking up for Australia, and we've got an opposition leader and an opposition, which is absolutely full of these kind of doji sycophants who have hitched their wagon to American-style slogans and policies, and especially cuts, which would make Australians worse off. And now they wonder why nobody believes them when they desperately try to pretend to unhitch their wagon from some of the policies and cuts that we've seen in the US. And so this is a pretty important choice, a Prime Minister speaking up for Australia and standing up for Australians, or an opposition leader and an opposition who have made it clear for some time that they take their cues and their instructions and their policies directly from the US.
Doji sycophants, you've just heard really the big challenge to the opposition here, Angus. I mean, my question to you is, can you get the phone call to Donald Trump? Can you lift these tariffs if you're in government?
Well, we did last time when we were in government, and we've heard the first piece of nonsense from Jim tonight, which is that we're not prepared to take on an American administration. We did when we were last in government, and we will again. But Jim and the government are trying to pretend that they've always been advocates for free markets. This is the government that has shut down the sheep trade in Western Australia. I mean, they're not advocates for getting access to markets. They've done the exact opposite. The last Labor government shut down the cattle trade into Indonesia. We have always been the ones fighting for open markets, for our farmers, for our exporters, for our miners, for our manufacturers, and we will always be the ones who stand up for them. When we were last in government, of course, we did take on the Trump administration and we avoided tariffs as a result. Jim went over to the US not long ago, got the photo opportunity, but he didn't come back here with what we needed, which is free access to the US market.
All right, I want to go to the markets now, as in the stock markets. They tell you something about the future. They tell you that the risk of a recession is much higher. Peter Dutton has said basically under a Labor government, if re-elected, Australia will go into recession. Why wouldn't Australia go into recession if there's a coalition government in power? Surely you've got to have, if it's good for one, it's good for the other. You can't avoid that.
Well, Peter is responding to Jim's forecast, which is he's now forecasting interest rates. He likes to forecast. We need someone who wants to manage the economy, not just forecast it. And he was forecasting big cuts in interest rates. Now, that's only going to happen if the economy is falling off a cliff.
Okay, so
and if there's something that Jim knows about the economy falling off a cliff, he should be upfront about it.
So Jim, I'll go to you on this. Is there a recession coming in Australia?
No, we don't expect that, and that's what I said earlier in the week, and Peter Dutton has lied about that multiple times since then.
But is there a downturn? And given the fact you have spent a lot of money, and over the last 50 years, this is one of the highest spending governments, except for COVID, in the history of Australia over that period of time. So what I'm wondering is what shape is the government's budget in right now after that spending? Because even yesterday, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, said he would keep on spending. He sees no reason not to keep on spending.
Well, first of all, it is important to remind everyone that we expect the Australian economy to continue to grow, and Angus and Peter Dutton should stop lying about that. That's an important correction, an early correction. When it comes to the space in the budget is in a much stronger position now than it was 3 years ago. And that's because I've delivered 2 budget surpluses. There's been a $207 billion cumulative improvement to the budget bottom line. The debt this year is $177 billion than what we inherited. That's saving $60 billion in debt interest over the course of the next decade.
But okay, that's today.
And that
what
gives
about
us,
over the next 10 years? Because that's the issue, isn't it?
That gives us more room, if necessary, to respond to these difficult global conditions. But I want to make it clear.
So you're saying if there was a downturn, this government's got the capacity to keep spending to prop up the economy?
The point that I'm making is there is more room to move in the budget because we've managed it responsibly, those 2 surpluses, and getting the deficit this year much smaller than what we inherited from Angus and his colleagues. Now, it's important to remember that when it comes to this new world of economic uncertainty, the most important thing that we can do, and the most important thing that we are doing, our best defence against all of that, is rebuild incomes with higher wages and lower taxes, and also to make our economy more resilient. Now, those are the 2 strategies at the core, not just of the most recent budget, but all 4 of my budgets.
Okay, I want to go to both you on one issue. The heroic assumption in the budget that's just been delivered is that 4.25% unemployment is the maximum over the next 4 years. But if you get an economic downturn, like we're suggesting might happen as a result of what's happening around the world with tariffs right now, that unemployment rate goes higher, the budget gets blown out, the debts and deficits get much bigger. That's on your watch, it's got to be. So what do you do to support that?
Well, first of all, the labour market has performed incredibly well on our watch. The average unemployment rate under this Albanese government is the lowest of any government in 50 years.
But you might not have had a shock like this one.
But it means that we go into this uncertainty around the world from a position of strength. And what we've been able to do, which is unusual in the world, is get inflation much lower than what we inherited from Angus at the same time as we maintain very low unemployment. And of course, if the economy slows dramatically, there are implications for employment. But because of what we've been able to achieve together as Australians over the course of the last 3 years, we're stronger than many other countries when it comes to the labour market, and that's really important.
So you admit that if there is a downturn, it could have an impact on employment in Australia?
I think it's self-evident that if the economy slows sharply, then that has implications for unemployment. But what we've shown is in getting inflation down, we've been able to keep unemployment low at the same time. Not a lot of countries have been able to do what we've been able to do together as Australians.
Okay, so Angus, I'll ask you the same question because you would inherit this budget as it currently is. You're trying to find cost savings throughout it. You might not get the choice if there is an economic downturn, unemployment rises.
Well, can I just start with some nonsense we've heard from Jim? I mean, he started from the point of view of saying that there's been meaningful growth in the economy. GDP per capita has gone backwards for 21 months in a row under your so-called stewardship, Jim. And the result of that is our household standard of living, what our incomes can buy in terms of goods and services, has collapsed in an unprecedented way, 7.9% since you came into government. The buffers are gone. If you look at household budgets, they're deep into digging into their savings. We see that when the national accounts come out every 3 months. And when it comes to government, you're on your way to $1.2 trillion of debt over the next little while. And 120, no, well, there's more. There's substantially more, and you know that. And $125,000 worth of debt and income payments that Australians are going to be wearing in a couple of years under your plan. And there is no plan. This is incredibly important. Your plan that you put out in your own budget doesn't have our standard of living going back to where it was when you came into government until 2030 or beyond. The Reserve Bank thinks it's 2031. This is a lost decade that you're overseeing, Jim, a lost decade. And Australians deserve better.
Okay, but the only thing is you need to manage this.
Sure.
Now, the fact of the matter is, if there's less money coming through because there's more unemployed people, and remember that 50% of the government's money is PAYG taxpayers, right? So the fact of the matter is, do you make deeper cuts?
Well,
is this where the government's got a point that the cuts that you make really go hard into services in Australia?
Look, what we need to have happen over the next little while to ensure we get through this is to encourage investment, to get business investing and give business and consumers the confidence to get on with things. But the truth is that investment as a percentage of GDP...
Questions about cuts.
Well, let me finish. Yeah. Investment, this is how you get through tumultuous times, Jim. You know, I've spent 25 years in economics and business, and I tell you, the way you get through tumultuous times is you manage the economy. And the key to that is giving people the confidence to invest and get on with things. And right now, we've got investment at 12% of GDP. It's the lowest since the early 1990s, the recession we had to have. And the result of that is we're not where we need to be. Now, that's why we're putting in place Investment Australia that will streamline investment processes, get approvals moving.
But what I'm asking, how do you manage an economic downturn where a government has got to cut? Where do the cuts come from?
You give the private sector the confidence to grow. Now, here's the key.
But if you're in an economic downturn, there is no confidence.
Here's the key. Well, if you get investment moving, you can keep the economy moving. And here's the key, Ross. The way to manage a budget is to grow the economy faster than you're spending. It's a simple rule. It's one we had in place when we were in government. Jim hasn't stuck to that rule.
Okay, but
he threw it out the window. Grow the economy, manage your spending. You can get through. Now, we've said in terms of
but we're now here, you're talking about a recession. You're talking about a possible downturn. There's no growth in a downturn. That's my point to you.
Well, you know, if you get business investing, you can avoid a downturn. And here's the absolute key. We've said grow the economy faster than spending. We've also said there's $100 billion of spending that Labor has committed to, Jim's committed to, that we think is unnecessary at this time.
So give me an example of that.
And the key, well, we don't need to build the 28,000 kilometres of power lines that Chris Bowen wants to build. I mean, energy prices are going up enough already. We don't want them to go up more. We don't need to go down the track of the rabbit burrow of green hydrogen that, again, Chris Bowen wants to do. And we've said no to that kind of spending. We've said no to housing programs that aren't delivering a house, manufacturing programs that aren't delivering any manufacturing. In fact, the first in their manufacturing program, the first dollars were spent on a quantum computer company out of the west coast of the US. This is not where our money should be going.
All right, not where the money should be going. But Jim Chalmers, you may have to cut as well. What I wonder is what could go is the $20 billion to forgive student debt.
No, we're committed to cutting student debt for millions of Australian students.
That's $20 billion.
It's a very important investment and we're proud of it, and we will do it if we win the election in a few weeks' time.
But there are two generations of people who had to pay off their debts. So why now is the government coming out and saying we're going to just help everybody out? Well, surely there's a point at which you've got an economic downturn. Something's got to give.
I'll tell you, Ross, the most important thing that we can do here, and student debt's part of it, help people with the cost of living, we're doing that. Cut taxes for every Australian taxpayer, we're doing that. Invest in a more resilient economy in uncertain times. Now, the reason why Angus was so evasive when you asked him to come clean on his cuts is because I think for the first time in our history, Angus is going to the election with three policies. First of all, to increase income taxes on every Australian taxpayer. Second of all, lower wages. And thirdly, secret cuts to pay for nuclear reactors. And you can't find $600 billion to pay for those nuclear reactors without coming after Medicare, just like Peter Dutton did when he was the health minister.
All right, now I'm going to move on.
Can I just respond to that, Ross? Because there's complete nonsense again from Jim, and he really should stick with the facts. The only energy plan that's going to cost $600 billion is your energy plan, Chris Bowen's energy plan. That it's absolute nonsense. There will be lower taxes.
Just made up that.
There will be lower taxes under a Dutton government. A lower fuel tax, 25 cents off at the Bowser immediately for every Australian who buys fuel at the Bowser. And you might dismiss that. You might think that's irrelevant, but let me tell you.
You said you're going to increase income taxes
in my part of the world, reducing fuel tax.
That's his policy.
Is real, it's relevant, and it's immediate, unlike your 70 cents a day in 15 months' time.
All right, what I'm getting out of that is if there is an economic downturn, you would both have to find cuts. There's no doubt about that.
Well, can I say something about Ross? I mean, we found $95 billion in savings. In their last budget, they found none. We've been able to show real spending growth restraint, half of what the 30-year average is.
But
we've been able to deliver two surpluses when they delivered none.
27.2% of GDP the next financial year, the highest level for 40 years apart from the pandemic.
Well, that's an important point, that the highest spending government is actually the Morrison government.
Well, hang on, but that's because you had a pandemic.
Well, let me give you the.
Well, that's the number.
We've got spending as a share of the economy. The 3 years that we've been in office is lower than what they projected. All 3 of those years. That's a fact.
Yeah, but that's
in the budget papers.
Anyway, so I'm not going to defend him, but that was because they were coming out of.
Well, spending as a
reference point is always coming out of the pandemic.
Well, that's the situation that we inherited. And when they were in office, spending as a share of the economy was almost a third of the economy. We got it down near a quarter of the economy, and we know that there's more work to do.
All right,
but that's very loose with the facts. Can I, Ross? And it's really important. Jim's government and Jim as Treasurer and his latest budget has added $425 billion of spending since they came to power across the forwards, across the 5 years of the forwards. Now that is extra spending that you have gone with. We've said $100 billion.
Pension indexation.
$100 billion. Well, hang on.
Medicare,
$100 billion of that is not appropriate.
Relief.
Well, hang on.
Which of that are you
can't have it both ways, Jim. Now, we have supported essential services spending. We'll put a bill into the Parliament to protect that, make sure that is as it should be when we come into Parliament. But I tell you what, Jim.
Can I move on, please? If that's okay.
You can't help yourself with the $425 billion.
If you think $425 billion is wasteful, then come clean, look down the barrel of the camera and tell people that pension indexation will go, Medicare will go, natural disaster funding will go. These are some of the big parts.
You should not say you haven't increased spending when you have, and there's $100 billion of that, and I've already laid out the sort of areas where we're focused, which is not essential services spending and is not required at this time.
41,000 public servants won't go because you've changed your mind on that.
No,
that was a cut.
We have said we want to see a better public service, not a bigger public service.
Yep.
You know, again, unlike Jim, I spent 25 years of my life working in business and economics, and I learned in that time that you don't need a bigger team to have a better team.
I've got to move on. I've got to tell you. Let's go to the second issue of this election campaign. That is the cost of living. It's really important for families. It's a vote winner or loser. I'm going to start this by going to the leaders' debate at the People's Forum last night, where Anthony Albanese, Peter Dutton were there. But I want you to watch this and just notice how many hands go up when they're asked by Kieran Gilbert if times are tougher right now. Just have a look.
Can I just get a show of hands? Who's doing it pretty tough? Who's finding it hard to get by at the moment, the way the economy is, cost of living pressures and so on? Yeah, that's quite a few hands there.
I do microwave dinners because that's the only way I can live at the moment because it's too hard. It used to be steak and sausages, like different nights of the week, but now it's a struggle. It's ridiculous. It's not right.
Groceries is insane. Like now I'm paying like almost $350 a week to get through with the kids. Like I got 5 kids, like I say, I get paid weekly. 1 week's small, 1 week's big. I pay electricity myself. Electricity a month is $200, around $270. Then I pay gas as well, so gas is $50.
Just in the last 12 months, you know, where I used to pay, it's only me and my husband at home, $80 for groceries, it's now $180. And that's just the basics. I think Albanese is all talk and no action. I really don't want him to get in. I mean, I've been Labor all my father told me when I started voting, always vote Labor. But this year I'm not voting Labor. I'll probably go for one of the independents because I don't think Peter Dutton's any better.
Pull your finger out and look after Australians. That's what that's what we all have to do. There's a lot of Australians that are poor. A lot of Australians living on the streets. That's ridiculous.
Just shout out this guy. Pull your finger out.
I'm actually going to go back to the streets of Werriwa, out the Bonnie Rig, and really go to some of the voter questions as well on something that is affecting so many people, which is that cost of living.
I mean, we're thinking of starting to raise our own chickens, growing our own food, because just to go to the grocery market and get enough groceries for the week is too expensive, so it's easy to grow. How are you going to ensure that we don't have to pick up the extra slack by making things more expensive, and we feel like we have to do our own growing of eggs and raising of chickens and growing of food?
Everyone should be doing that anyway.
Other people who are not basically eating cuts of meat anymore, people who are really going to abandon your party and potentially not go to your side, go to independence. Now, this is a grave fear for Australia. Right now, I want to go to one little thing about cost of living, and that is Australians are feeling the pinch. If you give them $150 for the gas, it's not enough. You can't give them enough. Really, it's about a job, it's about wages. These are the things that Australians need to improve their cost of living, which has fallen so far down the scale of the OECD standards.
Well, first of all, we understand that even with the progress we've made together on inflation, getting real wages growing again, and also keeping unemployment low, we know that people are still doing it tough. And that's why the centrepiece of the budget a few Tuesday nights ago was cost of living relief. Energy bill rebates, strengthening Medicare, cheaper medicines, student debt relief, and the tax cut.
Is that enough to just win votes, or is that enough to make a difference to people?
This is a very coherent strategy to help people.
Is it enough?
To help people with the cost of living.
Is it enough, Jim?
Well, it's more than what our opponents are proposing. Now, remember, when Angus Taylor in a minute tells you that he cares about the cost of living, remember that he wants lower wages, higher income taxes, and there is no ongoing cost of living relief if Peter Dutton wins the election. And there's another choice there. If you're under the pump, Labor is doing more for you to help with the cost of living in an enduring way and in an immediate way. What Angus is proposing, lower wages, higher taxes, and no ongoing help.
So is that true? Do you actually want lower wages and higher taxes?
The only person who has delivered lower real incomes and lower real wages in this term of Parliament is you, Jim. Now, we just heard a bunch of people talking about the hard reality of their lives, struggling to make ends meet. Many of them live right next door to my electorate, and I hear that every single day when I'm out there. It's why we've put $50 million.
Why do you want to increase that taxes?
Let me finish, Jim. $50 million into food banks, because we're seeing families with mortgages, double income families in some cases, who can't put food on the table. That's the harsh reality of Labor's homegrown inflation. And Labor's cost of living crisis.
But hang on.
We know that first and foremost, you've got to beat inflation sustainably. You can't pretend it's over when prices are still rising, and prices are still rising. And we know the key to that from history, is you've got to make sure you've got a strong economy, strong economic management. That means cutting waste, slashing red tape, not essential services, not essential services. We have also said that immediate cost of living relief that really works is the focus. So a lot of those people out in that part of the world, they're travelling long distances to get to work for family, and that's why 25 cents a litre off the bowser we think is immediate and can have a real impact, as will lower energy prices. Pumping extra gas into the Australian network, Australian gas working for Australians, we know we can drive the price of gas down from $14 a gigajoule down to 10. The thing about gas and energy, is that energy is right through the economy. When you eat food, it's based on gas. When you build a house, gas is essential to making the building materials like bricks. If we can get that price down, we can put downward pressure on prices right across the economy and get back to where we need to, which is a rising standard of living for Australians, to overcome the collapse that we've seen since you've been in power.
Angus, before I go back to Jim, I just want to ask one thing, and that is we started on this talking about this. There could be an economic downturn coming. Now, the cost of living's bad as it is right now.
Sure.
Just imagine how bad it is if the unemployment rate rises from 4.1 to 5.5%. All those families, hundreds of thousands of people out of work as a result. Now, then you've got a crisis.
Yeah.
So what do you do about that? Because the cost of living is going to be out of control at this stage.
And then you need a government that has buffers, that has shock absorbers.
But you said before we were not
under Labor, they've gone. They've gone. I mean, we've got $179 billion of deficits over the next 4 years. So you've got to quickly get the economy moving again. I mean, and that's the absolute key. You've got to make sure you're not spending money that doesn't need to be spent, and you focus on the things that are really going to help people's lives at a difficult time like this.
Like higher tax,
like 50,
you
like
increase taxes on all of those workers.
If you let me finish, Jim,
and you want them to get lower wages
into a food bank. Like making sure that the cost of energy is going down so that we can get our energy sector where it needs to be. And that'll help with our food, our construction sector. Under Labor, we've seen groceries go up by 30%. Gas, electricity, insurance, all up by over 30%. Your homegrown inflation has had this impact. There is a better way, Jim. We know how to beat inflation. We know how to beat inflation. We know how to beat inflation, and you've completely failed to achieve that.
You just literally just made those numbers up.
All right.
But no, Ross, this is important. If Angus really cared about the cost of living, he wouldn't be saying to every worker that he wants them to pay higher income taxes. He wouldn't be saying to every worker we want you to be on lower wages. He wouldn't be saying to everyone under the pump that they will provide no ongoing help with the cost of living. And to make that worse, he won't even talk about the $600 billion he needs to find to fund these nuclear reactors. They can't find those $600 billion without cuts, including in areas like health and education, like they've done before. And that's why he's had multiple opportunities to come clean tonight, and he won't do it.
So Jim Chalmers, can I ask you while we're here on cost of living, will you apologise to the people of Australia tonight for having your government having said that energy prices would come down by $275 when, in actual fact, average prices, according to the Financial Review, are at least $500 more than what they were at that time? So you said 275. Will you apologise to the people of Australia?
I take responsibility for all of the decisions that we've taken in our budget.
So you will apologise?
Including, let me finish, including the fact that energy bills last year were $300 cheaper because of our energy rebates that Angus didn't support. Energy bills would have been higher last year if he had had his way. Now, over the weekend, the OECD said that Australia has the lowest energy inflation in the developed world.
But that's now it's not what it's been like for the past few years.
The last year of CPI data, inflation data, says that electricity prices went down in 2024, and that's largely because of our energy bill rebates that he didn't support, but not entirely because.
But the people at home, like that, you can say that inflation's coming. That's not prices coming down. The prices are still high from where they were. You know, it might have come off a little bit, but the prices are still up there. So what I'm saying is, will you look down the barrel of the camera and apologise for that? Because is that something you should do? Because, again, that was a promise that was not fulfilled.
Well, the 275 figure that you're referring to from the modelling in 2021 predated two important developments. The first one was Angus intervened to hide a big price rise before the last election. We didn't know about that when we talked about that modelling. And the second thing is there's been a major land war in Eastern Europe, which has caused a global spike in energy inflation. Now, despite that, Australia now has, according to the OECD, the lowest energy inflation in the developed world. And that's because we're doing two things. We're helping people
Ross,
with bills now.
If I may, Jim will look for an excuse for everything. He will look for an excuse for everything. Labor promised 97 times that electricity prices would come down by $275. And the excuses are across the board. You know, it's Vladimir Putin, it's President Xi, it's Donald Trump. It's Cyclone Alfred. Yeah, he'll use them all. But the one thing he won't do is accept that people who are promised a $275 reduction in my electorate and in those areas we just heard from a moment ago are $1,300 a year worse off than was promised by Labor.
That's a made-up number two. That's a made-up number two. Ross, they're $300 better off last year on their electricity bills because of our energy rebates that you opposed.
Okay, so I have to move on. I really do have to move on. Thank you. I just want to go to one thing, to the both of you. Now, I've spoken to friends and foes of both of you over these past few days, knowing this debate was coming up. And can I just say, Jim Chalmers, people say you are the best communicator in your party. Right? They say you are the very best at explaining things. We hear a lot of it tonight. The things that they say, you're brilliant at detail. You are a very hard worker, extremely hard. Your staff work hard as well. The one thing they say is you've got a bit of a glass jaw, that you don't cop criticism well. What would you say to that?
Oh, I think over time I've learned to understand that you take the good with the bad. And I try and...
Do you get a bit grumpy sometimes or not?
I think everyone gets grumpy sometimes. Right. But I don't think I get grumpy about that necessarily. I think I've learned over time to focus on the objective observers of the job that I'm doing. And I think ultimately the Australian people will judge that.
All right.
Rather than the kind of partisan commentators from time to time on the opinion pages of major
I've spoken to, Jim, remember that. Angus Taylor, the thing I hear about you, again, Rhodes Scholar, incredibly gifted, was a man really in some ways born and many times told you were a future Prime Minister. Question is, some people suggest that maybe you don't put the work in. You maybe have heard that as well. What's your own sense of that?
Well, you know, there's lots of free advice in this
I understand that.
You get it. Jim gets it. Yeah. We all get it. But I tell you what, I work every single day for those hardworking Australians who work, you know, in Jim's electorate, in my electorate, right around Australia.
Right.
And that is what I'm here for. You know, I spent, as I said, 25 years in business and economics before coming to politics. And the truth is, I learned through that time period that hard work does matter, and I come from
allow you each to ask a question of the other. I'm going to allow you to go first, Angus, and ask Jim a question.
Well, I'm going to have another go at what you just did, Ross, which is because before the last election, Jim, you and your now government promised Australians a lower cost of energy, a lower cost of living, and that life would be better. Instead, you've overseen the biggest collapse in our living standards in history, bigger than any of our peer countries in the world. Will you apologise to Australians?
Well, first of all, I mean, Angus wrote down that question and then you asked it, and he didn't have the ability to think up a second question. I think that's...
Well, I'm giving you another go, Jim.
Yeah, look, I'll say a couple of points about this. The first point is the measure that you're relying on, which is net disposable income per person, was falling very sharply when we came to office. It was actually falling in the quarter we came to office by 1.6%. That made us one of the worst in the OECD. And that measure is now growing again. And I'm glad you asked me about it. I appreciate you
down 8%.
I'm appreciating you asking me that because we've now got that measure growing again. It was falling sharply under you, and now it's growing again. The reason it's growing is because of the tax cuts, because we got inflation down, and because we want higher wages, and we've delivered higher wages in our economy. Now, again, if you really cared about living standards, you wouldn't have opposed our cost of living measures, and you wouldn't be taking to this election higher income taxes, lower wages, and secret cuts to pay for the nuclear reactors that you still haven't mentioned.
All right, Jim, I'm going to get you to ask Angus a question as well.
Yeah, I want to ask Angus, will he repeat the same commitment to no cuts to health or education that his party took to the 2013 election?
We will bring a bill into the Parliament to guarantee spending on essential services, including health and education, including health and
no cuts?
I gave you a go, Jim, including health and education, because they are essential services for Australians. Where we will ensure we find the savings that are necessary to get Australians' cost of living under control is in those areas I talked about earlier. Manufacturing programs that aren't about manufacturing. I mean, a quantum computing project out of the west coast of the US. Housing projects that haven't delivered a house. I mean, these are not the essential services.
Can you make
let's be clear. On every year when we were last in government, health and education.
You cut $80 billion.
Health and education spending rose.
I'll tell you why this matters, Ross. Can I tell you why this matters?
You both go.
Because Angus and Peter Dutton have both said the best indicator of future is what's happened in the past. Now, in their first budget, after promising no cuts to health and education, they cut $80 billion
All right, I'll go back,
out of health and education, and that's why he won't answer this question.
Well, here's the reality, is that health and education spending, as I just said, you weren't listening clearly, Jim, went up every year when we were last in government. And I've been very clear about health and education guarantee. In fact, right to the point where health, we have already committed over $9 billion to ensure that we deal with your mess where bulk billing has gone down sharply in your time in government. Can I come back
No, I'm going to move on. I've got to go. Now, I've got to go to the issue because health and education, you both know, are paid for by taxpayers, largely. Okay? So as a result, the way in which that's paid for is by people working, paying taxes, and companies making profits and therefore paying taxes. And I want to go to Australia's lack of competitiveness. We're used to having competitive sporting teams. The same is true for our economy. To fund all the services we need competitive businesses, making money, employing people, paying taxes. You've talked about this. You've talked about it as well. Now, quickly, I want to have a look at this. Corporate tax rates around the world. Now, I note small and medium-sized businesses in Australia are 25%, but look, Australia for big business, 30%, UK 25%, Europe 21%, USA 21%, give or take, Singapore 17%. Problem is right now, with America, what Donald Trump is doing, businesses, Australian businesses, picking up their money and they're going overseas. What I want to do is what you're going to do to make Australia more competitive. Can you bring down that corporate tax rate? Can you actually bring down the price of energy? Can you make industrial relations a much easier thing to employ and let go a person simply so that we can have a more competitive business environment?
Yeah, first of all, let's not talk down our businesses or our economy. 850,000 new businesses have been created under our government, 25,000 a month, the highest average ever. So let's remember that. Business investment last year was the strongest business investment in more than a decade. Business investment's growing faster under us than it was under our predecessors. And so he always wants to talk down the economy because he wants to dismiss and diminish the progress that Australians have made together, and he wants to distract from his secret cuts. Now, when it comes to investing in the future, making our economy more resilient, more productive, more dynamic, this has been a key focus of the government. More competition reform than
productivity, as you know, you can't talk productivity because it's actually dragging along the bottom at the moment.
Yeah, we have
it's disastrous. It's dropped by 6% since you came to power.
We have a substantial productivity challenge in our economy, which hasn't existed for the last 2 years. It's existed for the last 2 decades. The worst decade for productivity growth was the teens, and they were in government.
No one has overseen a 6% productivity loss in 2.5 years.
The worst decade
like you have.
Since the war.
Well, let me finish.
That's the fact.
I give you a go, and you need to give me a go. Sure. So 6% drop in labour productivity in your time in power. That did not happen under us. And let me tell you that the fundamental problem is that businesses are absolutely wrapped in red and green tape. They can't get approvals through. They can't get investments done. They've got regulators pouring all over them, regulators that have far more people in them than when you came to power, 41,000 additional public servants and many good people in the public service. But let me tell you, Jim.
So you are going to cut.
Let me, Jim, we've been clear about that. Let me be clear that you have allowed those regulators to grow topsy, and businesses, as a result, are struggling to make investment. Business investment down at 12% as a proportion of GDP, the lowest since the early 1990s. Now, how do we fix this, Ross? And this is the right question.
I'd like to have a crack at that.
Absolutely. Well, just let me finish. It's the right question. Is we need to give businesses incentives to invest. And that's why the instant asset write-off is such a crucial.
Okay, to both of you. I think both sides of politics are politically scared to undertake big tax reform. I thought that would have been one of the things that you would have done as Treasurer. You would have advocated a lot of the Henry tax reviews and really overhauled Australia's tax system to make us more competitive. I would have thought you'd be talking about this as well. Neither of you talk about
That's not true, Ross. 3 rounds of income tax cuts, including lifting thresholds and cutting rates.
Which the money was already put aside for the opposition.
Build-to-rent tax reform, production tax credits, multinational tax reform, PRRT tax reform. There's been more tax reform done in this term of government than for a long time now. Now, you asked me about company taxes, and I want to go to that.
Yes.
That comparison you use doesn't always compare apples with apples. That's the first point. Second point is we have found ways to provide substantial tax breaks and tax relief in all of the ways I've described, including the production tax credits that he opposes. Now, when it comes to productivity, this is a really important choice between the two sides. There are 2 ways to turn around this productivity performance, which hasn't been good enough for 2 decades. Their way is to make people work longer for less. Our way is to get more cleaner and cheaper energy into the system, invest in human capital so that we can adapt and adopt technology, and also competition policy, non-compete clauses, national licensing regimes.
We've just heard Jim completely misdefine productivity. Productivity is working less for more, Jim. That's what it is.
You had the
and it's collapsed under you because people are working more for less.
Okay.
And that's been a Labor outcome.
Now, I'm going to go to that.
Real wages are up. Real wages are up.
Real wages.
And there are 3 rounds.
Real wages for hardworking Australians are way down.
So they were falling when we came to office, and now they're growing again.
The cost of living for hardworking Australians is up 18%.
I want to go to some of those hardworking Australians.
Income's
right now,
nothing like that.
I want to go to some of those hardworking Australians right now, hear a bit more about them and just what they're experiencing right now.
Too much.
Electricity prices.
Electricity, everything's too much.
How much are you spending on groceries a week?
Oh, my shopping comes up to about $4.50.
What are you buying?
Well, I feed a family of 4 or 5 and the kids come over. I have to buy everything and everything's expensive. Everything's expensive.
And how are you finding?
It's hard.
Yeah?
It's hard. Believe me, it's hard. By the time you pay everything, nothing much left for you.
Yeah.
My life goes on, hoping for the best.
All right, so I've brought in here the political editor of Sky News, Andrew Clennell, who will ask each of our candidates, as it were, a question. How do you reckon we're going so far?
Oh, a good bit of argy-bargy, I've got to say, Ross. Jim Chalmers, your budget contains $179 billion worth of deficits over 5 years. Over that period, the extra cost of the NDIS will be another $33 billion. The cost of your $5 to $10 tax cuts will be $17 billion over 4 years. Your public service wages bill, after you hired another 46,000 public servants, will be $8 billion a year. That's $40 billion over the 5 years. That's $90 billion I've just spelled out of the $179 billion of deficits, and that's before we get to other campaign promises. You also have us heading to $1 trillion of debt, in fact, $1.2 trillion of debt, having had a go at the coalition for the same thing. Jim Chalmers, isn't this the opposite of your hero Paul Keating's so-called beautiful set of numbers? Given these numbers, are you prepared to rule out cuts if you are re-elected? And haven't you left Australia in a weak position in terms of a fiscal buffer for a global economic crisis? Jim Chalmers, why have you left us with a decade of deficits?
Well, despite all of that investment in strengthening Medicare, providing tax cuts, providing cost of living relief, making our economy more resilient, the budget is $207 billion stronger than when we came to office. And that's made room for those investments. And it's meant that we delivered 2 surpluses. Our predecessors delivered none. The deficit this year is half as big. We've made a structural difference to the budget in areas like the NDIS and aged care and also interest costs. And so we are getting the budget in much better nick, and we're doing that without ignoring our responsibilities to people who are doing it tough.
Angus Taylor, a decision was made by you as Energy Minister. We've heard about it from Jim Chalmers tonight in 2022, before the last federal election, to delay a decision on electricity price rises past election day, rises which were 11 and 12%. So you effectively hid that power price rise from the Australian people. Now you're promising or releasing modelling claiming your gas reservation policy will cut power prices by a meagre 3%. And your only other power price solution is 15 years away in nuclear. Why in 2022 did you hide that price rise from the Australian people? And given you did, why can we believe your policy promising this 3% reduction in power price?
Well, I absolutely didn't. And in fact, what we saw in my time as Energy Minister is a cut in electricity prices of between 8 and 10%, depending on whether you're a small business, large business, or a household. We also saw big reductions in gas prices. Hear me out. They'd got up to close to $20, and we got them down to closer to $5 to $7 over my final time in the role. And we saw as a result of that, lower electricity prices and lower costs right across the economy. This is the key. If you can get gas prices down, it's not just gas prices that come down for consumers, they clearly do, but also the price of food, the price of building materials. So much of our economy is energy. Energy is everywhere through our economy. If we can get those costs down, and we can by getting more Australian gas working for Australians, we can have a lower cost of living for all Australians.
Okay, Angus Taylor, many thanks. Andrew Clennell, thanks for those questions as well. But as we go on, let's go to our final voter question. This time the focus is about housing. Have a listen.
Hello, Jim Chalmers and Angus Taylor. My name's Eric, and on behalf of young Australians here in Australia, I just wanted to ask, what are you guys going to do when it comes to making housing more affordable and preventing young tenants being evicted due to rent increases?
Just want to know why our interest rates haven't decreased in regards to our living standards. At the moment, our younger generation can't afford to buy a house because of our interest rates and our cost of living of standards.
So housing is obviously a big issue in this election campaign. Rents, interest rates, the price of housing, the availability of housing. Jim Chalmers, today I heard Adam Bandt come out and say that Labor cannot rule in its own right after this election, that it will need the Greens to be a coalition. He also says that if that happens, he will go for capital gains tax. He will actually seek to ban negative gearing. How will that help to build more houses?
Well, I don't agree with Adam's position. We're seeking to govern in a majority. That's our goal. Now, when it comes
to... So you wouldn't compromise on negative gearing or No. So if you were in a coalition with the Greens,
we won't
if you needed them, but if you were, would you actually then compromise on negative gearing and or on capital gains tax?
First of all, we're not entering into a coalition with the Greens. We seek to govern in a majority. We don't take our cues or our economic policies from the Greens. We've got our own agenda on housing. And our agenda on housing is $33 billion of investment so that we can build more homes for Australians to buy or rent. In addition to that, we've increased Commonwealth rent assistance twice. We're working with the states on planning and zoning. We've got a very broad, very ambitious agenda on housing. It's one of the most important things that we've focused on in all 4 of the budgets that I've delivered with Katie Gallagher. And that's because we do understand that one of the big pressures when it comes to cost of living is housing. That's why we're trying to build 1.2 million homes over the course of the next 5 years, because that's what will take some of the pressure off the market, make it easier for people to buy or rent a home.
Will it be dangerous if the Greens do have any form of power after this election? Is that a message for Australian voters, do you think?
No, we've made it clear we've got our own agenda.
I understand that, but I'm saying that the reality is the way that people vote might end up that the Greens do have some sense of power. Is that a dangerous thing for Australia?
Well, that's in the hands of the Australian people who've got the ability to elect a majority Labor government under Anthony Albanese, building more homes, helping with the cost of living, strengthening Medicare and making our economy more resilient. If people want the reliability that comes from a majority Labor government, they can vote for it. That's one of the things that they can do.
Okay, I'll go to Angus Taylor here. Would it be dangerous if the Greens and Labor came together in a coalition after this election?
Oh, extremely dangerous. We heard it from Adam Bandt today. He wants to do probably what Jim wants to do, because we know he's asked for Treasury to do modelling on this. He wants to get rid of negative gearing. He wants to impose capital gains tax on the family home. He wants to tax people's unrealised capital gains, which of course is exactly what Jim is doing. But let me tell you, when it comes to housing, Labor's plan is 1.2 million. Most of the experts think they'll be lucky to get to even 800,000 of that. What we need is a genuine focus on breaking the infrastructure bottlenecks to get more supply into the market. We believe with our housing infrastructure fund, we can get 500,000 new houses, take pressure off the demand side, because immigration has been out of control under this government. Another 100,000 on top of what would already be occurring. Another 100,000 houses by freeing up demand, making sure that foreign investors aren't crowding out the market, a 2-year ban on foreign investors owning existing homes, and helping young Australians into a home by allowing them to dip into their super, which they'll have to put back up to $50,000. And this is all alongside, and I think one of those comments there about interest rates was really important. We want APRA to make it easy, who's the regulator, again, another regulator that we believe has been overreaching in recent times, to make it easier for Australians to get a loan. And we'll be directing them to do exactly that through this statement of expectations. So, look, this is a broad package. It really matters. I want young Australians to have the hope and aspiration and knowledge that they can, if they choose, buy a house as part of their pathway through life in this great country.
You're also cutting the Housing Australia Future Fund,
which hasn't delivered a house. It hasn't delivered a house. You know, a housing fund that doesn't deliver houses is not a great housing fund.
I want to go also to immigration. One thing that the government will do is cut student numbers. Now, it's been talking about this. Why students? Students ultimately would be the best Australian citizens. They would be the best Australian taxpayers because they're young, they're educated.
Angus Taylor with a couple of great things, I'm not going to lie.
National education sector, but one of the big drivers of the post-COVID spike in net overseas migration was students, and so we're managing that down to a more normal level. And so what you'll see in the budget is that we are lowering net overseas migration and we are building more homes. Angus voted for higher migration when he voted against the student caps, and he voted against more homes, and now he says he'll abolish the Housing Australia Future Fund. They haven't worked. So we're managing immigration down, we're building more homes. He voted for higher migration and fewer homes.
So does Australia need more migrants, less migrants?
Well, right now, we've had over 1 million people in just 2 years, which is double what was sustainable, and we've had half the housing we needed to support that. And so we've said very clearly those numbers are too high. And that's why we will impose student caps, 25%.
You voted against them.
Well, these are real student caps, not pretend ones, Jim, because every time you put out a new immigration forecast, the numbers go up. They did again in your last budget flop. They went up again. They just keep going up.
You've lost
control. Well, our policies are clear. A 25% reduction in permanent migration, 25% caps, 25% caps on the G8 universities, bringing the humanitarian visa level back to where it was when we were last. And we know that this will bring down the NOM This will bring down the NOM by around 100,000
All right.
the first year.
Okay, now we're coming to the end of our time. So I want to give you both a bit of time to sum up today. And I really want your best pitch about how to get Australia growing and why it is the best country. I haven't heard great stump speeches in this election campaign. I want you to give me one now, Jim Chalmers.
Well, these are uncertain times, and we've got a lot going for us as Australians, but there's a lot at stake. You know, this is a really important moment in the global economy, and we get to decide whether we go to the world more resilient under Labor or more vulnerable under the coalition. And this debate and Angus's inability to come clean on his secret cuts to pay for his nuclear reactors has made the choices really clear, whether we build on the progress that we've made together or whether we take Australia backwards. And the choices there, as I keep coming back to, is Labor helping with the cost of living, cutting income taxes, strengthening Medicare, building more homes, building Australia's future, making us more resilient in an uncertain world, or higher income taxes and lower wages and secret cuts to pay for nuclear reactors. That's not an economic plan, that's an ambush. And it's just like 2013-14, which is why we're hearing all of the same rhetoric again. Now, there could not be a more important time for the responsible economic management, which has been the defining feature of this Albanese government. And there could not be a worse time to risk Peter Dutton's coalition of cuts and chaos, which would make Australians worse off and take Australians backwards, because when Peter Dutton cuts, every Australian will pay.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Jim Chalmers. Angus Taylor.
Well, thank you, Ross. And I said up front that the key question for this election is who do you trust to manage the economy? And of course, we've seen in the last 3 years, Australians have got poorer, and it's clear that Australians can't afford another 3 years like the last three, and yet that is exactly what Labor is promising in their own budget. We've been laying out our positive plan to get this country back on track, to beat inflation by cutting waste and slashing red tape, to boost growth by backing business and backing investment in this country, by fixing our energy market, by getting more supply into the market, fixing housing so that young Australians can hope to buy a house as part of their journey through life in this great country, to give relief at the Bowser, 25 cents a litre immediately, not in 18 months or 15 months' time. And of course, to fix our budget so we can protect our nation into the future. Before I came into politics, I spent 25 years in business and economics, advising people at the highest level in business, starting businesses and working in our family farm. I want to take that experience to be the treasurer, if I get the opportunity of this great nation, to work with every Australian to get our country back on track.
Angus Taylor, thank you so much for that. And can I say, we are pretty much out of time. What you've experienced tonight is two of Australia's most accomplished communicators in politics, each for their own side, and certainly potential leaders of their parties into the future. You've also heard the distinguishing features of the two of them in this particular debate. And now, of course, the decision is yours as to which side of politics you'll support in this election campaign. Thanks for your company tonight. Really appreciate it. I'm Ross Greenwood, and have a great evening.
It was better than last night, to be honest.
You reckon? I thought that was, look, uninspiring, but Angus Taylor definitely nailed it. I think he was more inspiring than not. And I think that's one thing that businesses need. They need confidence. And I remember I grew up in Coburg North, very close to Camberfield. And you used to have all of the dealerships there, and then all of the car fucking manufacturing factories like Ford and all of the ones down far down Sydney Road. I'm just trying to have that vision. And then I used to work at the Holden factory at Port Melbourne as well, near the city. Now it's all gone. All of it's gone. I remember I did my last couple of days at Holden, and then I was finding out, oh yeah, the factory is getting shut down. Everything's getting shut down. And that's the thing. We have no manufacturing in this country anymore. There's no business confidence. Everything's shipped off to, well, now America and China and everywhere else. We've got nothing in Australia. You're muted.
Maybe you muted me, my bad. But anyway, that's what annoyed me about the tariff portion of the conversation, because it's not that the tariffs to do with Australia specifically are going to stuff us over. It's the fact that Trump's coming down really hard on China, and so they're going to up the costs for everyone. And a lot of Australian businesses obviously import from China because we don't manufacture anything anymore. So it's more complicated, and I think Angus Taylor did really well in terms of just his debate skills. I think were far superior to Jim. Like, Jim was very visibly just reading off a script, whilst Angus, I think, learned his standpoint and was actually better prepared to argue. And that really shone through. Even though it's, for the most part, quite uninspiring, I think I'm inclined to personally prefer to see Liberal have a go. Because obviously they haven't built houses, they haven't done this, they haven't done that. It's nothing but broken promises. So, you know, in spite of the fact that both parties are quite useless on a lot of things, I think in terms of the housing crisis and possibly cost of living, we might see a better outcome with the Liberal National Party.
Yeah, he definitely nailed it. And it's kind of funny that Ross goes, is it true that you have a glass jaw, Jim Chalmers? And you could just see him clenching his jaw, like he was getting angry at Angus Taylor a couple of moments here and there.
Ross was a good host. I liked that.
I think Angus Taylor definitely did probably a better job for Liberal Party just on the optics, and being a bit more inspiring than Peter Dutton's done over the last 2 weeks. So if anyone that watched it with us felt like this was better than last night, I think that might be the reason why. I felt like yesterday was so uninspiring. Watching Albo and Dutton, it was like watching a press conference. I said this last night. It's like watching the press conferences from the last 2 weeks. It's the exact same talking points, but just on a stage instead of at a presser in a studio.
Yeah, I was saying in the comments before that Angus Taylor would have been a better choice for Liberal Party leadership, and that leadership is so important, because if Angus Taylor was actually running for PM, this would be a landslide decision, because he's well-spoken and better prepared and just naturally very confident. And he, you know, I like that he has a tendency to back up what he's saying with receipts, which is very important when you're debating somebody, not just reading off the usual Labor empty promises script. And so I think the failure of both parties ultimately is an absolute lack of ability, or willingness rather, to choose competent leadership. And so again, it's just who is the least shit, and that's what we're left with. And I kind of quietly would like to see the Liberal Party win and to see them roll Dutton for leadership, just purely for entertainment value, and also to welcome the possibility of better leadership. I mean, if they did it in the Labor Party with old mate Rudd, why can't we have that level of chaos in the Liberal Party?
No, it was good. It was good. And if anyone wants to join our poll, I've just put up another poll on YouTube. So if you're watching on X, jump onto YouTube. I posted the link in the original post. We've got 115 votes, 300 people watching. Jim Chalmers, Angus Taylor, we're screwed either way. But currently, Angus Taylor is actually winning the poll. So I think the sentiment's quite similar to how we feel. I feel like Angus Taylor's a bit more refined in his talking points, a bit more inspiring. You could tell that in his demeanor. You could tell in Jim Chalmers' demeanor. It kind of looked like he did have a bit of a glass jaw moment here and there.
I think that's the difference.
But yeah, those are the two debates.
Yeah, I think that's the difference between somebody that has a strong economic background versus somebody who's a professional shit talker. When you get down to the nitty-gritty of debates, there's a natural confidence that comes with experience. And unlike Jim, you know, belief is a poor substitute for experience. And it's always like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But there's no demonstrated consistency with any economic competence from the Labor Party. So that's where it shines. That's where the natural confidence comes from. And people in the comments saying that Dutton is a competent leader, I would say barely, because again, there's a natural confidence and it shines through in a really easy way when somebody is a natural leader. This man is fighting for his life in every press conference, and he's very rigid and uncomfortable. And that is not somebody who's a competent leader in my mind, objectively speaking.
I'm just pulling up the seats because it's always interesting to see the seats for their electorates. So let me just make this a bit bigger. So Angus Taylor won on a what was a swing? 5.3% swing to ALP. That was 2022. 43.1%. One Nation came fourth. Independent. Who's this? Penny Ackery. I mean, there's no challenge out of the two major parties in his seat. And then what's Jim Chalmers' electorate? Because one thing that we're both going to do is I just want to see who we can knock off out of every marginal seat. But just for this sake, it's just interesting to see what the last election outcome was.
Isn't Dutton's seat quite marginal?
Yeah, I'll pull it up. ABC.
Now that's a spanner in the works.
Yeah, a lot of people behind the scenes are trying to knock off Dutton for no other reason than just for the lols.
Oh, and
yeah,
honestly,
so 51.7.
Yeah, as much as I feel bad for the guy because he's trying very hard and I think he's sincere in how hard he's trying, I don't think he's cut out for it. And
No, he's not.
I can see him just rolling on really critically important things. But then again, his deputy, I don't know much about her. It's Susan Ley, isn't it?
Yeah.
She's been quite, I guess, quiet and not disruptive. So I don't really know where she stands on a lot of things.
Nah, she's just like a mirror. She just mirrors Dutton's talking points.
Wait, is she marginal as well?
Let me pull it up. Susan Lee, lecturer, ABC.
Because at this point, let's just boot him out for entertainment, to be quite honest. We'll have a fresh start, because I think we can all agree. Like, we want, obviously, our friendly minor parties to dominate the Senate, but in terms of a majority government or minority, we want the coalition to have that over Labor. But I think the issue is just...
It's a very safe seat for her.
Damn.
Very safe seat.
I think we just need a change in Liberal leadership, primarily, and it won't be as excruciating.
Well, that's the problem with the news that came out yesterday. They reckon that there's people in the Liberal Party that are infiltrating and trying to knock off all the right-wing, more moderate, conservative parts of the factions.
Hang on, who else ran in that seat?
Darren Cameron's the Labor, and then the Greens, Eli Davison, One Nation, Richard Francis.
Yeah. So, I mean, if any friendlies are running there and they put up a decent campaign, I reckon they could knock Susan down at least 10%. And if they went to preference against her as well, that could change things. I don't believe anything's impossible when it comes to election season, if people are willing enough to shake it up. I mean, if you look
this is definitely... I'm just going to say this is definitely the election where I don't think any seat is too safe. I think we definitely have the momentum and the public sentiment to be able to knock these people, maybe not off their pedestals and out of their seats altogether, and get, you know, like a One Nation up, because One Nation's always just behind them. But you know, this is the time where we, you know, take a really big swing at them, and hopefully we can let them at least realize that we're not playing anymore.
And an example of this and why it's possible is Matt Keane. So he was in a 17% safe seat, and that's dropped to like 10 maybe from the last election. So it's not impossible to really hit him where it hurts. It's just a matter of being able to convey the message in time. And I think the momentum's really there to just knock off the leadership in the coalition so that we can have the change that we so desperately deserve as the Australian people. So I reckon it's doable. People are angry enough. What do you guys reckon in the comments? Is this delusional or do you reckon it's possible? I reckon it is, but only from examining election results and the way cultural attitudes and swings can have a major impact. And people, like, they love to make you think that you're powerless, but nothing could be further from the truth. You know, everything feels like a lost cause until people start banding together to really hit them where it hurts. And I think this could be one of those elections where there's a bit of a revenge aspect and giving them as hard of a time as they give us.
Right. Coalition Doak sycophants. Yeah, so they're just taking the piss out of the fact that they keep pulling up Trump talking points. One page that I always monitor, let me just pull it up, is this one. So anyone on X, if you want to see stock market updates or just tariff updates, Watch a Guru is great. 1 hour ago, China central bank asked state-owned banks to reduce US dollar purchases. Japan Nikkei stock market falls 5%. Worldwide US tariffs officially in effect. This one's hilarious. I haven't watched this clip, but I saw it before when I pulled this up. President Trump says countries are kissing my ass to make new trade deals. Let's hear what he has to say. Chuck on volume. There we go.
Because I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up, kissing my ass. They are dying to make a deal. Please, please, sir, make a deal. I'll do anything. I'll do anything, sir. Because
I wonder if Albo is one of the guys that are trying to kiss his ass. He finally got that call.
Oh, somebody release the call recording, please. It'd be so funny. Oh, imagine him trying to justify that to his supporters.
But yeah, I mean, that was good. I think overall that was probably I can actually confidently say that was a positive outcome for Liberal Party. I think Angus Taylor's been more inspiring, and he definitely won that debate in my mind. Out of the two, Peter Dutton just is not built for this. I think he'd be good, like a good, portfolio manager for, I don't know, something on the side, but he's not leadership quality.
Agreed. Nice bloke, doesn't have it in him. And I think, unfortunately, you're either born with charisma or you're not. And you just can't get around it no matter how many coaching sessions you have with a PR team. You can't fake warmth and natural wit, quick responses. The cylinders aren't firing in an independent way. It's very much a learned script, and that's both with Albo and with Dutton. It's not just Dutton. Albo is very much the same. And even John Howard said the other week that it's very clear that Albo's out of his depth, but all his previous opposition in the Labor Party, he didn't feel that they were unqualified or didn't know what they were talking about. But with Albo, it's pretty pitiful comparatively, and I would agree there's a big lack of talent. And to the people saying that Jim Chalmers has 25 years in economics, well, again, you can be a total dud and still get an education, but it doesn't mean that you're competent in your craft. It doesn't mean that you have charisma and natural confidence and the ability to comprehend and quickly respond to things within your field in a good way. So yeah, again, they need to really hone in on who they're selecting for their lead talent. And I hope that this election really, really teaches people. You would have thought that Albo versus Morrison would have got the job done, but it's like we have to hammer them into the ground. They have to dig the grave to the very bottom to actually understand that this lesson has to be learned from. Anyway.
All right, I think that's it. I mean, there's so many things that need to be fixed. For me, it's like the money that goes to foreign, like other countries, Ukraine, your PNG, your Israel, what else? Building synagogues and just all of this crap. Just cut all of that. Like that for me would be probably the first thing. The fact that, you know, you've got what, apparently like 15-20% people apparently on NDIS now, like a fifth of the country's on some sort of disability pension. Audit all of that. I wish that maybe you can consider, I don't know the ins and outs of AUKUS, but the $240 billion, that's an insane amount of money. That's your deficit right there in a big deal like that. I'd reconsider that. And I don't know much about defense spending, and I don't know much about this deal, but one thing that I do know is that I saw over the last couple of weeks China just doing laps around Australia for the fun of it, saying that they want to take over Australia. What's the point? What, we're going to wait 30 years for $240 billion worth of submarines that we might not get, when China's already preparing to do a land invasion tomorrow? What's the point? At least you use the money while we've got a chance to get something out of it. And then what else? Removing a whole bunch of people that are here on temporary visas, and get rid of that scholarship deal that we were talking about the other day, that Indian Australian scholarship deal, where a scholarship in India gets recognized in Australia. Like, cut all that crap.
Yeah, they need to crack down harder on the recognition of prior learning when it comes to migrants. I do not believe, and this is just with the capacity for corruption and the fact that a lot of things are bought, not earned in their country. In India, you can even just buy a driver's license, and that's why we have so many terrible drivers over here. They just come in and use their international licenses with no assessment required. It's very much the same in education. So in order to ensure that we're not putting GPs that just basically have a Google degree into the workforce in Australia, there has to be a better assessment mechanism. So
yeah, I'm just trying to find the articles specifically that I had, but it's basically like an offer to Indian international students seeking their scholarships, scholarships, their degrees being recognized in Australia. That's a thing as well. Just cut all that. But yeah, I mean, the reform that, and then tax reform as well. Like, we get tax out of the friggin' everything's tax, and not only that, it's funny that in America they thought that our GST, the 10% GST, was a tariff. It's a tariff on us. I thought that was hilarious. They thought that that was a tariff, but it's just a self-imposed tariff, the GST.
Yeah, I made the point in the comments as well that I would like to see, instead of just simply cutting back international students, which they should anyway, but they should make it so much more expensive for international students to study here, so that extra income can then pay for our education as Australian citizens. The unis are the most exploitative industry in this arena, and it's not actually about the migrants, it's the way that our government is doing all these shifty things to advance the interests of these different corporate mechanisms. And so everything needs a reform. Like, we actually really do need to drain the billabong, so to speak, when it comes to all these corporate gatekeepers that are just creating all this policy. And, you know, big donors seem to create the decisions in this country. And who are they? They are the corporations. And so, you know, we see this with the international wars as well. It's very obvious that certain people are donors, and that's why they get so much attention.
Peter Dutton, I didn't actually see this until early this afternoon. Apparently is walking back to his original immigration policy to cut it by 100,000. So I read a little bit of this earlier. So Peter Dutton is committed to cutting new migrant numbers by 100,000 each year, reinstating the target that they originally walked away from. So that's going to be interesting. I don't know if people got wind of that, but this is something that came out. I think this was either in the morning or afternoon. The article's posted in the afternoon, but I think his press conference was in the morning. I didn't get a chance to watch it. But I mean, 100,000, that's a little bit less. That's what, 1.8 million over 5 years. And then
500K or
yeah, so it's down to like 400 basically instead of 500.
it's not enough.
Still a ton. Like you got to cut that, I don't know, by
And it's
say
not only that.
500,000.
If they did that, but they strictly only let in people that assist with our skills shortage and cut back on the ones coming over and jumping on welfare as soon as their permanent residence recognised. Like, that's my problem. And it's very obvious for me. Like, I volunteer in a community centre, and basically it's about 80% of the people that come in for things like electricity relief, where you can get $200 off your electricity bill if you can demonstrate financial hardship. And this is not having a crack at the migrants. Again, I blame the government for all of this. But for example, you've got the Muslim communities that are able to have their, recognised marriages through their imams and their mosques, and they have their ceremonial marriage. But what that means is that when they're permanent residents, they don't have to declare the husband's income. So what they're doing is they're claiming all the financial assistance for themselves and their children. And they come in and they do the applications and they get the electricity relief. And, not to even hone in on just one specific community, but the government's not doing anything to regulate these massive problems. All this stuff is going out to new arrivals. And, the source is lived experience. Like, this is stuff I've personally witnessed. That's not a joke. And a lot of people laugh about the fact that they're able to get away with doing it. And to be honest, fuck the government, go for gold is kind of my opinion. But, and that's to say that the government needs to realize how big of a threat that is in order to feel enough pain about it to change it. So, yeah. It's just not good enough. And Australian families can barely afford things these days as well.
Say, his sentiment on immigration, regardless of this policy, reneging on it and then going back on it, I've said repeatedly that we are a great beneficiary of the migration program in our country. So regardless of whether he's going back on a policy that he turned away from it, I think it was last week or week before, he still values migration. He says it all the time in his speeches. We have a great immigration story. I mean, that's still a ton of people, 400,000 people a year. 4 MCGs worth of people on a grand final day coming into the country every year. I don't like it. But I do like the fact that Angus Taylor definitely probably helped him a lot in terms of voter sentiment coming off a bad week and a bit now with Peter Dutton taking a lot of L's. So we'll see how this plays out. I mean, at the end of the day, the biggest thing that I want to see is just aspiring entrepreneurs and small business owners to be able to actually achieve their goals in Australia. That's one thing that I enjoy the most, is being able to start up a business, do like a sole trader job, work as like I've worked as a personal trainer, worked in security, started small businesses, failed and then started again and then had success. Like that is what I want to see. I want to see people be inspired again to do all that without all this bloody red tape, registering stuff with ASIC and having to wait for all these things to be cleared. I hate all that crap. That's what holds people back as well.
Exactly. And it's like I said before in the comments, 30,000 small businesses in liquidation. That's ridiculous. And again, they just keep applying more and more red tape. And that's part of the issue, whether it's that, whether it's councils and building approvals, you name it, there's a delay and some sort of bureaucracy that's stopping fast movement, even in things such as the housing crisis. It's extremely, extremely unfair and annoying. So either of these two yapping it doesn't make a tangible difference to the fact that they won't remove those mechanisms that are a cause for delay or increased difficulty for people wanting to get into these markets.
Yeah, I can see the sentiment's pretty consistent. You have to reduce the cost of starting a business and get rid of red tape and green tape. Like even just registering a business, you got to put, you know, if you want to do it, like if you want to tick all the boxes, do the whole box ticking exercise at the start. It's like $70 for this, $80 for this, $120 for this. You know, you're just paying for all these registration fees. You can't even get the first client on the books before you get any of that, registering an ABN, all that crap. Cut all that. Like, just do it for like, I think one guy in the debate yesterday, he was saying instead of doing the cut on the fuel excise for 1 year, do it for the term. Just do everything for a term. Like we all caused all of these economic problems over a whole term of government through COVID. Let's have a term where we just cut all of this crap, and maybe we can get business and manufacturing started again. Try to undo all of the policies that stuffed the country up over the last 3 years. Well,
Yeah.
6 years now, 5-6 years.
And they'd have to crack down on councils to do a lot of it. Like even for the hospitality industry, which has been on fucking life support for the longest time. Like, I don't even know how businesses stay open in terms of their rent and also the liquor licensing and the cost factor surrounding that. When you look at the people coming into these venues, it doesn't anywhere near cover the cost of staff and all of that behind the scenes expense that happens. So even if they did a relief and said, you know, we're going to waive that $20,000 license fee for a couple of years so that you guys can get back on your feet and actually generate some profit from the whole experience. Because again, the CBD cultures are dying, no matter which one you go to. And it's just crazy to see really popular locations dead on a Saturday night. But again, not only we the people can't afford it, but people can barely afford to keep the doors open. And the way to bring down costs for consumers would be to be lenient with business owners so that they can actually start getting an influx of people coming in. Yeah, that's right. The nightlife is really sad. It really hurts, you know. You see iconic locations that just withered away to nothing. It's ridiculous.
Oh, well, that's the two debates. I believe there's another Albo versus Dutton debate. I don't know what the terms of that is going to be just yet, but I believe it's not a Sky News hosted one. So the next time that comes up, I don't know the details of it yet. It might even be with the ABC. I think there were some complaints that they've only agreed to 2. They want to see them agree to at least 3 between now and election day in the next 3 weeks. But we'll get around that. I know that there's also one tomorrow at 12:30 with Chris Bowen and what's his name, Ted O'Brien. However, that's going to be boring and 12:30 afternoon. I don't think we're going to stream that. I might keep tabs on it. But yeah, it's not going to be something worth streaming.
And if it is, we'll just record it and then share it later and stream it.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll keep an eye on it, just at the back, and then if there's any good sound bites from it, I hope Chris Bowen gets grilled for his backwards energy policies and trying to defend net zero and trying to defend renewables and all that crap. If there's any good sound bites, I'll be sure to punch him in. But yeah, it's probably going to be the least inspiring of the 3 press debates. Sorry.
All right.
Couple of super chats. Port Film Co. The agenda is democracy itself. Why cover this? I mean, this was actually probably the better of the 2 so far. So that's why. And Know Your Realm. Thanks for streaming. Sky News for gatekeeping, paywalling the debates. Yeah, I mean, yesterday we had 4,000 people watching, so that was awesome. So thanks for tuning in. I think the Albo and Dutton ones are the most popular ones out of the ones that we can get. I hope that some minor parties might get an opportunity to be on a national stage. I hope maybe Pauline Hanson has something up her sleeve, because I feel like she might be the type of person to be able to line something up, maybe with Sky News or I don't know, with someone else. That'll be good to watch. I want to see the minor parties do it, but if they don't do it, then we'll do it. We'll try to get something lined up with these guys.
Yeah, I reckon we'll be able to do it without the censorship factor as well. We can ask the real questions.
Yeah, we'll get some cool people on. But yeah, thanks for tuning in over the last 2 days. We try to make it as fun as possible. It's as boring as watching paint dry. It's probably even a better option, to be honest. But thanks for tuning in with us, guys. Appreciate it. It was fun 2 days. We'll do the Elbow Dutton one from next week. I think it's on ABC. Apparently, you guys said it's on ABC. I think it's on ABC. We'll see if the dynamic is a bit different. And we'll make sure that's a fun large stream as well. That's it. Good night, everyone. 9 p.m. Have a good night, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.